Good morning, students. This is Professor Henry Young, or Dr. Young, I like to be called these days because I've just finished my doctorate degree about a semester ago. In my journey as an academic, it's very important that I was focused and committed and persevered through hard times. I share that thought with you because I realized that as we begin the first 4 weeks of this course, that some students, not every student, has experienced some hardship, frustrations with learning the material. So today what I want to do, and I'll do this throughout the remainder of the class, is I want to give you just some helpful hints that in my mind will help you to be more successful as a student here at Victor Valley College, and more importantly in this managerial accounting class, which is, as I mentioned to one of my students, Cassidy, that this is probably one of the hardest courses that you'll take here at Victor Valley College. Thus, if you're taking this course with Economics 101, with Economics 102, with a math class, and with the chemistry class, keep in mind that there is no such thing as a free lunch. In our academic society today, we are being fed, in my mind, a bill of goods that says that all you have to do is log on, guess a little bit here and there, and you'll be successful. And I say that with all due respect to all my students because I get that if you go, well, no, Professor Young, that's not me. And I would hope not. My point is that this course is rigorous. This course does require a study agenda. A study routine. Nothing in this class is going to come easy. Nothing in this class will be a situation where you'll be able to guess your way through. And I say that again humbly and with all due respect to my students because I know that you're not out there, as I say these things, guessing, that you are a diligent, concentrated, focused, goal-orientated individual. And you have planned your semester to the degree that you have at least 6 hours at minimum to study for your managerial accounting class. And when I mention study, I must also identify that studying has actually 3 facets to it in my mind. You have to read first, then you have to think, then you have to go back and review, you have to think some more. Then you have to go in and you have to study. And the study is when you actually look at the reading material, you juxtapose that to any PowerPoints that you may have. You also compare that to any lecture notes that you might have. And this is still all in the study phase. So step number 1 would be to read, and then think. And there is a separation between reading and thinking, right? There's a separation. Then after you've thought, and you then have to go back and study. So the studying is when you're putting things together, right? The studying is when you're asking yourself, well, what does this cost formula actually mean? Right? The y equals a plus bx. Why did my professor make me lament something about a cost formula when this is managerial accounting? Right? You might ask yourself. And I pose that question on the cost formula for you students early in the game because you're going to need that cost formula in Chapter 5. But also, I wanted you to all understand the relationship that graphing has with managerial accounting and what some of the components of graphing will enable you to do as you're determining decisions as a student of accounting and moreover as a practitioner of accounting maybe in the future. So the second phase is studying, right? So in that study process, that's going to also involve you to go back and do some reading. And so one of the things that I shared with a student that I had in a office hour was always look at your lecture notes first. Before you even go into the Connect, review your lecture notes. Now, the lecture notes allow for you to do some of that reading, as I mentioned earlier, and moreover, the thinking component. As you'll see here, job order costing. This is the chapter that we're in right now. This is a costing system that's used in situations where many different products, jobs, or services are produced each period. So now this is the first of three job costing systems, or shall I say costing systems, not job costing systems, but costing systems that you students are going to learn. Of course, another form of costing that we will look at is absorption costing. But you notice I've highlighted job order in yellow. So that's going to make me go back and really think about, okay, this chapter, the focus is on different products, jobs, or services. So as I think about that cost formula, when we go back and we say, well, y is equal to a plus bx, in essence, what that cost formula says is that total cost is equal to variable cost plus fixed cost x. Okay? Or moreover, it's actually total cost is equal to fixed costs plus variable cost x. And as one of my students mentioned in his discussion board, I think it was Samir, mentioned that the x is the quantity. Right? So now bringing just slightly into that here in that formula that we talked about, we can see inherently how that whole costing element, that formula in and of itself may be, in this case, may be embedded in some of the things that we're going to learn this week. So I've highlighted the yellow. Again, not to digress. Reading, thinking, reading again, thinking again, then studying. So at this point, I haven't done any studying. All I've done is took a look at the reading material, but I haven't touched Connect at all yet. I haven't gone in and done any of the Learn Smart components. I haven't looked at anything else into Connect yet. Some of the key elements that I believe are important is as we look at this particular chapter, the flow of cost is important. So I've highlighted it. Understanding the flow of cost in a job order costing system. And prepare appropriate journal entries to record cost. So now some of you have taken financial accounting and you're familiar with journal, shall I say T accounts, but some of you have not. Right? So one of the things that's going to be very important is that when I highlight this in green because I'm pretending that I'm a student that has never taken this before, nor have I ever taken financial accounting, and I see T accounts and I go, oh my goodness, what is that? So now two things can happen right now. One thing will say you'll stop reading. Someone would stop reading and say, I'm going to drop the course. Another student would say, oh, I don't get this. Let me email the professor and tell him that I don't get this and I need help. Right? And the third thing would be, well, let me contact one of my peers to see if they're having the same struggles. Okay. The point is that now this is where the ownership and education has to take place. And I say again, this with all due respect to my students. And by all means, as I see these things, this is my voice, these are encouraging, supporting words, right? Again, one of my teachers used to say, well, if the shoe does not fit, don't wear it. So if you know that you're doing your due diligence in this course, if you know that you're spending the time, that is committing to the process, yes, allowing the frustration to be, in some instances, a fail forward opportunity, you are going to be successful. However, if you are on that other side, and I hope and don't believe that any of you students are on that other side, where we develop excuses for our inability to commit, then that can impact your success. So again, this video is totally in support of you, and I want to give you some ideas on how to be successful. So please forgive me if the tone seems somewhat demonstrative. The tone doesn't seem as if I'm reaching out and giving you a hug, which I do believe that would be the intent. If I could maybe not hug you, but I would smile and welcome you to my course if we were in a face-to-face course, and I would say to you, give you some anecdotal things to do to be successful. So this is my way of doing that. So some other key things that I think are important when we talk about the T accounts. Keep in mind now, students, all we've done is read and we've done a little studying, but more importantly, we've thought about this. As I mentioned, this class will take extra time. It will take extra dedication. So I've highlighted some items in the green that I think are important. So after you downloaded the lecture notes, the next thing would be to download the PowerPoints. And don't view the PowerPoints on the Canvas shell because it's very limiting if you do it that way. Open your PowerPoints up in their own window so you can truly see some of the aspects of the PowerPoint, but also be able to kind of flip back and forth between the lecture notes and then the PowerPoint slides. So this first slide just indicates that job order costing is what we're doing. I mentioned to you that there's several other type of costing systems. Now, again, when we talk about that equation earlier that we spoke about, you'll see this slide says the equation shows how to calculate the predetermined overhead rate. You say, well, which equation are you talking about? So immediately what I would do is on a notebook piece of paper, I would write this equation down. Predetermined overhead rate is equal to the estimated total manufacturing overhead cost divided by the estimated total amount of allocation base. This is a problem that you're going to see in the homework. And talking to one of my students, she was really surprised when I went back to the lecture notes and we found the formulas that she needed right there in the lecture notes. But more importantly, they're also identified here in the PowerPoint. So now when we apply use this formula, that is the predetermined overhead rate, you'll notice here on this next slide that the equation also applies for us to do this process, that is the overhead application. That is the process of assigning overhead costs to specific jobs. And how do we do that? Well, overhead applied to a particular job is the predetermined overhead rate, that's what we calculated earlier, times the allocation base. So those two things are paramount. The first thing I would do is write down this formula here. What is predetermined overhead rate? And then the second item I would write down is this overhead applied formula. I know I'm going to see this at some point throughout the chapter. So as you progress through the chapter, you will see now this T account template, and it shows how the cost of producing a job, a particular service or good, how the costs flow from the raw materials to work in process to manufacturing overhead, and thus how this is recorded in general journal form. Hugely important, one of the biggest components of this chapter. Now keep in mind, I've talked for about 12 minutes. What I would suggest is that you would go back and you would review the items that we've gone over. That was just the first page of the lecture notes, the first 2 slides, 3 slides, and then stop and think, okay, so what have I learned, or what haven't I learned? Now at this point, once I've done that, then I'm going to go into the website now, and I'm going to identify some of the key areas within the chapter that are of critical concern. So students typically would go in and they would hit the McGraw-Hill Connect, and you go into the class. And then the first thing that I see here, so keep in mind now that each time you go into the class, when you go into the syllabus area of the class, you'll see assignments. Sometimes you'll see more assignments there than are actually necessary. Well, keep in mind what's happening here is there is a sync process, S-Y-N-C, a synchronization process, that as your instructor, I have to bring the assignments that you see here that you can view with this open eyeball. I have to sync those assignments to the Canvas course. But sometimes the computer syncs everything, right? And so then I have to go back in, I'll get an email, and the student will say, where are we? And I get your confusion. And so then I have to go back in and I have to shade these eyeballs and make sure they're not viewable. And then I have to show the items that are necessary for a particular week. So anytime you see that, don't let that confuse you. Say, okay, my professor obviously is doing some syncing. We have more assignments in this area than we need. Let me go to what I know I need, and that's when you go into Connect. And Connect will identify the actual due dates that I have set. Okay? So then, as I mentioned in this process, now you see that you have several things to do. You have an interaction video that I would definitely look at, right? Obviously, you have the reading. Moreover, you have the Learn Smarts, right? So I'm going to click on the Learn Smarts because I say, well, how can I maximize my time maybe, right? Because now we're getting to a point where you got another class, you got a phone call, maybe you have to go to work. You may not just be feeling well today. But once again, you know that you have about 7 to 9 days to synthesize information in this course only. And then you have to apply it. Functionally, as I mentioned, if you have other courses, as some of my students do, you have to go through this same process. One of the things I don't want my students to miss, and as a doctorate, I've received my doctorate online at an institution, it was the most work I've ever done. And I had 2 degrees previous to that, right? But in-class learning is completely different than online learning. But there are some valuable advantages for taking online courses in my mind because it gives you freedom, right? Right now, you're probably sitting at home in your jammies, right? Or if you're like me, I have a suit jacket on and I have a professional shirt on, and then I have my sweats on at the bottom. I couldn't do that in a normal sense, right? If I was at the college. So when you get into this Learn Smart, one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that this is your area to actually preview the information as it applies to the course. And I give you a Learn Smart to do for every week. Right? So you'll notice here, when you first get in here, you'll see that the screen will look something like this. And it'll give you the nuts and bolts of the chapter. One of the things that I mentioned to my students is that I typically suggest that my students read the summaries first, but I don't think I can navigate to your summaries yet here. So the first thing I see in here is I see a review problem, right? And my review problem is going to be a problem that's going to detail the key items that are necessary for the chapter. Now, I know you can faintly see it in the back. Oh, there you go. So you'll see here, and when you do the review problem, I would walk through this. I would give myself at least 1 hour to walk through the review problem. Before you begin, read what's required. Prepare journal entries to record the preceding transactions. So if you know inherently that you're not really comfortable with journal entries, then that's some work you're going to have to do some reading on before you even attempt the homework. And we haven't gotten to the homework yet. Then it says post the entries in the above T accounts. Don't forget to enter the beginning balances, which are very important. Then it asks the question, is manufacturing overhead under-applied or over-applied? So keep in mind now with this overhead and job order costing, what's happening is the manager is applying an estimated amount that he or she feels is going to be allocated to the overhead, right? Indirect materials, indirect labor, those things that are overhead in nature. And he or she is saying, okay, it's going to be $15,000. That's at the beginning of the accounting period. Then the accounting period happens and the goods are produced. And there's another calculation that's taken. That calculation is then going to assess what the true amount of overhead it actually was. So let's say it was allocated as $15,000, but the actual amount was $10,000. So then that would mean that the overhead account was underapplied. Or shall I say overapplied? Please forgive me, because if you place $15,000 in the account before the production is done, and then $10,000 in the account is when the production is done, this means that we've overapplied it by $5,000. And there's a journal entry that would be necessary to reconcile that difference. Okay? And then it asks you to prepare an income statement, which you're used to some degree. So then it walks you through the actual problem in terms of the answers. It gives you step 1, step 2, and step 3. To me, if you do this before you touch anything else in Connect, you're going to be more successful. Also, this last page here is a glossary of terms. And you can click on each of these glossary of terms and it'll take you or give you a definition. So it talks about absorption costing, allocation base, cost of goods manufactured, more importantly, underapplied overhead, and the definition that is connected to that. So then when you go back to the actual class here, that is not literally the class, but the section within Connect, see how we get out of here. Return to instructor view. You would be returning to your student view. Then it makes sense, right? Then you can, now you can say in and of itself, oops, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened here. Give me one moment. Yes. I do apologize, class. Systems, right? Systems, Connect. Let's go back into it. All right. So now, once I've done that, then I can go back and I can take a look at what's required for the week. Remember, in my mind, you should go through this process at least 4 times per week. And it has to be uninterrupted. Okay? So hopefully that helped. I'm going to let you think about this and see what takeaways you will have from this. You can obviously talk to each other about this. And keep in mind, if you're talking to one individual in the class, make sure you talk to multiple, because we do have some people that are succeeding in the class because they are doing the work. And then all it takes is one bad apple to spoil the bunch. One person can say, well, the professor's not doing this, the system is not doing that, therefore I don't have to do that. And in that point, we pass the buck and we're not taking accountability for our existence. And I say this again, I'll use the term lovingly. If you're in this class, as I am, we have an opportunity to learn and to grow and to become more knowledgeable. And that takes time. That is going to be the encumbrances of frustration. That is going to be times where you say, I want to quit. But it is transformationally important that you don't quit and that you just do better, that you try, that you read more, that you think more. All right. Class, thanks for your time today, and I hope this was advantageous. And we'll see you next week.